Dear viewers, tonight's story takes us to Houston, Texas, in 2014, where a 19-year-old Latina named Sofia Morales faced a nightmare she could never have imagined. Wrongly accused of a crime she did not commit, she entered prison expecting punishment. But what awaited her went far beyond the sentence handed down in court. Her true ordeal began in the silence of the nights, when a watchful officer turned her vulnerability into his own stage. He did not hurt her in the way most would expect. Instead, he stripped away something invisible but far more devastating, something that left scars no one could see. This was not a story of fist or violence, but of manipulation, control, and a quiet terror being noticed by the wrong eyes. Sophia's strength was tested in ways she had never prepared for, and the way she fought back changed everything without a single blow. If you want to understand how silence can be transformed into resistance, then stay with me until the end. This is where it begins. Sofia Morales never imagined that her life would be reduced to a case file and a number. At 19, she worked part-time at a small grocery store, stacking shelves and running the register, saving every dollar for the college courses she dreamed of starting. Her days were ordinary, simple, and filled with quiet hope. That hope collapsed one morning when officers stormed her home before sunrise, their presence heavy and unyielding. She was handcuffed in front of her mother, accused of taking part in a robbery at an electronics store on the other side of town. Surveillance footage showed a shadowy figure in a hoodie, and the prosecution decided that shadow was Sophia. It did not matter that her time card placed her at work, surrounded by co-workers and fluorescent lights. The courtroom became a stage where truth was ignored. Her public defender stumbled over his words, overwhelmed and unprepared, while the prosecution painted her as cunning and opportunistic. The jury barely looked at her. Her mother wept silently in the back row, powerless as the verdict came down. The sentence was swift and merciless. 16 months in county prison. With a single strike of the gavel, her life was rewritten. She became inmate number 4412, stripped of her name, her plans, and her voice. The sound of her chains echoed louder than any defense ever spoken on her behalf. In that moment, she understood that silence was not just the absence of speech, but the beginning of her punishment. Harris County Women's Correctional Center stood like a monument to despair, its walls made of rough concrete that trapped the air and pressed down on anyone who entered. The paint was no longer white, but a sickly yellow, stained from years of neglect, and the smell of bleach mixed with sweat clung to every corridor like a warning that nothing here was ever truly clean. Sophia's cell was a narrow box with a metal bed bolted to the floor, its thin mattress offering no comfort. A steel toilet stood in the corner without privacy, a reminder that dignity did not exist within these walls. The lights hummed endlessly overhead, buzzing through the hours of the day until they cut into a dim glow at night. Sleep came in fragments, broken by the constant sound of footsteps, keys, and the occasional clang of a door slamming shut. The nights were the heaviest, suffocating her with silence broken only by echoes that seemed designed to keep her awake. She stopped speaking to those around her, retreating into herself, folding her body into corners as if she could vanish into the concrete. Food lost its meaning, each tray of bland rice and watery beans only another mark of time passing without distinction. She wrote letters to her mother on scraps of paper, filling them with words she never had the courage to send. The days melted into one another until she could no longer tell a Tuesday from a Saturday. She felt her name slipping away, her identity dissolving, until all that remained was the number stitched into her uniform. Sofia Morales had ceased to exist. She was only inmate 4412 that Officer Daniel Cole carried himself with precision that set him apart from the other guards. In his mid-40s, with a face always freshly shaved and a uniform that looked pressed even after long hours, he moved through the prison corridors like a man who believed he owned them. He rarely raised his voice, never barked orders the way the others did. Instead, he spoke in low tones, calculated and steady, as if every word were chosen to disarm. Sofia first noticed him one late evening when he appeared at her cell with a candy bar. He slipped it quietly through the bars, his expression unreadable, his presence lingering longer than necessary. She had not tasted chocolate in months, and the gesture unsettled her more than it comforted her. The following night, it was a paperback novel, worn and creased, handed to her without explanation. Then came shampoo, a small luxury in a place stripped of softness. Each offering seemed designed to blur the line between kindness and intrusion. His eyes followed her movements in silence, heavy and unyielding, as though he were memorizing her routine. When he did speak, it was never harsh. His words were almost gentle, asking why she never smiled, wondering aloud if prison life had already broken her spirit. She gave no reply, shrinking further into herself, but his quiet laugh told her that silence only fed his interest. The unease grew with each passing night. He was not overtly cruel, not openly threatening, yet the weight of his attention pressed on her like an invisible hand. Sophia felt him waiting, patient and deliberate, a shadow that never drifted far, a presence that promised one day to step out of the dark. Weeks passed before the line between uneasy generosity and something darker finally broke. One night, long after head count, Sophia heard his footsteps approaching, slow and measured, until they stopped outside her cell. This time he did not linger at the bars. He entered, settling himself on the edge of her bunk as if he belonged there. His weight pressed against the thin mattress, making her body tense with dread. His voice was low, almost soothing, when he told her she did not belong in a place like this, that he could make the walls feel less heavy, the nights less cruel. His words were wrapped in promises, but they carried a demand that could not be mistaken. When his hand brushed against hers, she froze completely, her chest tightening as though the air had been stolen from the room. He spoke of making things easier, of protecting her from what others might do. But his kindness came at a cost he left unspoken yet entirely clear. She wanted to scream, to shove him away, but no sound came, only silence that seemed to bind her in place. When he finally left, the cell felt smaller than it ever had before, the walls pressing closer, suffocating her. The following morning, desperation forced her to confide in Grace, a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and a reputation for seeing what others ignored. Grace listened without interruption, her arms crossed, her expression firm. Then, without a word, she reached into her waistband and revealed a small recorder, a device that looked almost fragile in her hand. She explained that another officer, one who could be trusted, was willing to help, but they needed proof, something undeniable. Sophia trembled as she held the device, her hands shaking with fear. She whispered that she could not let him touch her, that she would not survive it. Grace's reply was steady and unwavering, reminding her that she did not have to give him anything but space to speak. The weight of the recorder in Sophia's palm felt heavier than iron, a choice she had never wanted to make but could no longer avoid. That night marked a shift from silent endurance to a dangerous kind of resistance. The following night arrived heavy with silence, the kind that seemed to vibrate against the walls. Sophia lay on her bunk, her heart already racing before the sound of his steps reached her cell. Officer Cole appeared carrying a paper cup, the faint scent of coffee drifting through the bars. He placed it within her reach, remarking that she must miss the taste of something ordinary, something that reminded her of life beyond the fences. She stared at it without touching, her hands clenched in her lap. He lowered himself onto the bed beside her, his presence filling the small space until the air felt thin. His words came slowly, measured and intimate, telling her that she made him feel alive again, that she was the first person in years who made him remember what it was like to want. His hand slid across hers with deliberate weight, and her pulse hammered against her skin. Beneath the thin blanket, hidden from his view, her trembling fingers pressed the small recorder that Grace had given her, activating it in silence. Every word he spoke poured into its memory, every breath, every confession. He told her he could shield her from the worst of prison life, that he could keep her safe, but safety would require something in return. His voice dropped lower, almost pleading, insisting that she had to let him in. The air seemed to close around her, her body rigid with dread, when suddenly his radio erupted with static. A voice on the other end demanded his presence at intake. His composure cracked for a moment, and a muttered curse escaped him before he stood and straightened his uniform. With a final glance, he walked out, his steps fading into the distance. Only then did Sophia's body collapse, shaking uncontrollably, her breath breaking into shallow gasps. The recorder still ran beneath the blanket, capturing the evidence that could change everything. At dawn, her hand still unsteady, she passed it to Grace, who moved with quiet determination. The small device changed hands again during morning duty, slipping into the pocket of Officer Jenkins, the one ally hidden among the guards. By evening, the rhythm of the prison shifted. Strange men in suits walked the halls, their voices clipped and serious, their eyes scanning every shadow. Cole did not return that night. His presence evaporated as if erased, leaving only the echo of his absence and the memory of his words carved into the recorder's tape point 3 weeks after the investigators arrived. Sophia's world shifted again. The truth surfaced when the real thief, an older man connected to the electronics robbery, finally confessed. Court documents were amended, signatures were stamped, and her name was cleared on paper. The state released her with a single bus ticket and $12 folded into an envelope, as if that could repay months of lost time. Outside the gates, the Texas sun hit her skin with blinding force. She should have felt warmth, relief, maybe even joy, but the light only burned. Each step toward the bus stop felt heavy, as though the chains she once wore were still dragging behind her. When she returned home, the familiarity of her old room felt alien. The bed was too soft, the walls painted too bright, the air too free of the stench of bleach and rust. She could not sleep in comfort. Instead, she showered with a harsh prison soap she had hidden in her bag and dressed in oversized clothes that reminded her of the uniform she had left behind. Normalcy did not return. Silence followed her into every corner, pressing down even harder than the cell that once contained her. Sophia began to fill notebooks with scattered words and fragments of thought. Most pages were torn out, crumpled, or left unfinished. Yet one sentence returned again and again in shaky handwriting. He wanted something from me, and I gave him silence. The words became a rhythm, a confession that no one else would ever fully understand. The past clung to her in ways she could not shake, and the future felt like a void she could not step into. On the 1 year anniversary of her release, Sophia withdrew from everything. She ignored her phone, avoided her friends, and told her mother nothing of what she planned. In the quiet of her room, she opened the closet and sat on the floor with her back against the wall. From beneath her bed, she pulled out the orange prison uniform she had secretly kept. She smoothed the fabric with her hands, folded it neatly, and then slipped it on as though it had always been waiting for her. Beside her lay the notebook, its final page blank except for one stark line written with trembling determination. It never really ended. That was how her mother found her, silent and still, eyes open but unseeing. Sofia Morales was only 20 years old.